Asperger syndrome. Challenges of children and adults with autism spectrum disorders. Written by David Kelvins. Narrated by Wes Grant. Chapter 1. The definition. When you see someone who has Asperger syndrome, you may notice two things straight off. He's just as clever as other folks, but he has more difficulty with social skills. He also tends to have a compulsive concentrate on one particular topic or perform the same habits every time. Medical professionals used to think of Asperger's as a separate condition. However, in 2013, the newest edition of the standard book that mental health experts use, called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, changed how it's classified. Today, Asperger's syndrome is technically no longer a medical diagnosis on its own. It's now part of a more comprehensive category called autism spectrum disorder, ASD. That group of associated mental health problems shares some signs. Even so, tons of people still use the term Asperger's. The condition is what medical professionals call a high-functioning kind of ASD. That means the symptoms are less extreme than other kinds of autism spectrum conditions. The DSM-5 also includes a new analysis called Social Practical Communication Disorder, which has some signs that overlap with Asperger's. Medical professionals use it to specify people who have difficulty talking and writing, but have regular intelligence. Signs. They start early in life. If you're a mommy or father of a kid who has it, you might see that he cannot make eye contact. You might also find that your kid seems awkward in social situations and doesn't know what to say or how to react when a person talks to him. He might miss social hints that are obvious to other folks, like body language or the expressions on people's faces. For example, he might not realize that when someone crosses his arms and frowns, he's upset. Another sign is that your child may show few feelings. He might not smile when he's more than happy or laugh at a joke, or he might speak in a flat, robotic sort of way. If your kid has the condition, he might discuss himself most of the time and zero in with a lot of intensity on a single subject like rocks or football statistics. And he may repeat himself a lot, especially on a subject that he's interested in. He might also do the exact same movements over and over. He also might dislike change. For example, he might eat the same food for breakfast each day, or have a hard time moving from one class to the next during the school day. How you get a medical diagnosis. If you notice signs in your child, see your pediatrician. He can refer you to a mental health expert who concentrates on ASDs, like one of these. Psychologist. He diagnoses and treats issues with emotions and behavior. Pediatric neurologist. He deals with ailments of the brain. Developmental pediatrician. He specializes in speech and language concerns and other growth-related problems. Psychiatrist. He has proficiency in mental health conditions and can prescribe medicine to treat them. The condition is often treated with a group technique. That means you may see more than one physician for your kid's care. The physician will ask questions about your kid's conduct, including, what symptoms does he have, and when did you first notice them? When did your kid initially learn to speak, and how does he communicate? Is he focused on any subjects or activities? Does he have friends, and how does he interact with others? Then he'll observe your kid in different situations to see directly how he communicates and behaves. Treatment. Every kid is different, so there isn't a one-size-fits-all technique. Your physician may really need to try several therapies to find one that works. Treatments can include social abilities training. In groups or individual sessions, therapists teach your child how to engage with others and reveal themselves in better ways. Social skills are typically best learned by modeling after common conduct. Speech-language therapy. This helps enhance your kid's communication abilities. For instance, he will learn how to use a regular up and down pattern when he speaks, rather than a flat tone. He'll also get lessons on how to maintain a two-way discussion and understand social hints like hand gestures and eye contact. Cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, it helps your child change his point of view so he can better control his emotions and recurring behaviors. He'll have the ability to get a handle on things like outbursts, crises, and obsessions. Parent education and training. You are going to learn a lot of the exact same methods your child is taught, so you can work on social skills with him in the house. Some families also see a therapist to help them handle the obstacles of living with a person with Asperger's. Applied conduct analysis. It's a strategy that encourages positive social and communication abilities in your child and discourages behavior you'd rather not see. The therapist will use appreciation or other positive reinforcement to get results. Medicine. There aren't any drugs authorized by the FDA that particularly deal with Asperger's or autism spectrum disorders. Some medications, however, can help with associated signs like depression and anxiety. Your doctor may recommend some of these: selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antipsychotic drugs, stimulant medicines. With the right treatment, your kid can learn to manage some of the social and communication difficulties he faces. He can do well in school and go on to be successful in life. Chapter 2. Is it ADHD or autism? Attention deficit disorder, ADHD, and autism can look a lot like each other. Kids with either condition can have problems focusing. They can be impulsive or have a difficult time interacting. They may have some trouble with schoolwork and with relationships. Although they share many of the same signs, the two are distinct conditions. Autism spectrum conditions are a series of associated developmental conditions that can impact language skills, behavior, social interactions, and the capability to learn. ADHD affects the way the brain grows and develops, and you can have both. The correct analysis early on helps kids get the right treatment so they don't lose out on crucial development and learning. Many people with these conditions can have successful, happy lives. How are they different? Watch on how your child pays attention. Those with autism struggle to focus on things that they don't like reading a book or doing a puzzle. And they might focus on things that they do like, such as playing with a certain toy. Children with ADHD hate and stay away from things they'll have to concentrate on. You should also study how your kid is learning to communicate. Though children with either condition struggle to interact with others, the ones with autism have less social awareness of others around them. They usually have a difficult time putting words to their thoughts and feelings, and they may not be able to point to an object to give implying to their speech. They find it harder to make eye contact. A child with ADHD, on the other hand, may talk continuously. They're more likely to disrupt when somebody else is speaking or butt in or try to monopolize a conversation. In addition, consider the topic. Some children with autism can talk for hours about a subject that they have an interest in. An autistic child loves order and repeating, but one with ADHD does not, even if it helps them. A child with autism might really want the same type of food at a favorite dining establishment, for instance, or end up being overly attached to one toy or shirt. They'll end up being upset when regimens change. A kid with ADHD doesn't like doing the same thing again or for very long times. Analysis. If you think your child has either ADHD or autism, speak to your physician about what testing you will need. There's no one thing that can say whether a child has either condition or both. You can start with your pediatrician, who might refer you to an expert. To detect ADHD, doctors look for a pattern of behaviors in time, like being distracted or forgetful, not following through, having trouble waiting for a turn, and fidgeting or squirming. They'll ask for feedback from parents, teachers, and other adults that look after the kid. A doctor will also try to rule out other possible causes for the symptoms. An autism diagnosis begins with a parent responding to a questionnaire about the kid, usually about habits that started when they were extremely young. More tests and tools may include more questionnaires, surveys and lists, and interviews and observed activities. Treatments. It can be difficult for even physicians to tell the conditions apart, but it is necessary for your kid to get the correct treatment. There's no one-size-fits-all way to deal with ADHD. Younger children begin with behavior therapy, and the medical professional might prescribe medication if signs don't improve enough. Older children will normally get both. ADHD signs and their treatment might change with time. Different sorts of therapy, behavior, speech, sensory integration, and occupational, for instance, can help kids with autism communicate and get along better. Medication cannot cure autism, but it may make associated symptoms like trouble focusing or high energy easier to deal with. Chapter 3. Autism and Technical Smarts. Professionals explain why some people with autism are good fits for technically demanding jobs. The web can be a social paradise for high-functioning autistic people and people with Asperger syndrome. Here, the nonverbal niceties of social interaction that they find so perplexing do not use. People who may strike others as gauche, personally, often fit in perfectly well on web message boards. A web link to an autism screening test published just recently on dig.com, a tech news site, produced numerous remarks from users. Most self-described computer geeks took the online test, for which a score of 16 is considered average, and a score of 32 or higher suggests autism. 20, not autistic, just plain geek, one user commented. 38, definitely 38. Time for Judge Wapner, wrote another, a reference to a TV show watched obsessively by an autistic character in the film Rain Man. Diagnosing autism. Naturally, you can't identify anything by taking a test on the web. It is only a screening instrument. It isn't a substitute for full diagnostic evaluation, says the test's author, Simon Baron-Cohen, Ph.D., a psychology professor and director of the Autism Research Study Center at the University of Cambridge, England. In addition, the test tells you if you have a ton of characteristics, but it does not tell you if these traits are triggering issues. A medical diagnosis is only given if the person is suffering in some way, he tells WebMD. But if nothing else, the lively discussion thread on dig.com and comparable activity at other online techie hangouts like Slashdot highlights that tons of them are inclined to identify with autism. It's been said that those with autism invented the internet. Eric Hollander, MD, director of the Seaver and New York City Autism Center of Quality at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, tells WebMD. By email, you do not have to read individuals' nonverbal social cues. You do not need to look at body language or facial expressions. It's just the verbal content of communication. Not only does the web downplay autistic social deficits, but the language of computer systems also allows some people with autism to give full expression to their extraordinary capabilities. Asperger syndrome. Autism is a developing brain disorder that includes several signs, with a broad range of intensity. Most individuals with the disorder are said to fall somewhere along the autism spectrum. Some are severely disabled, but others might only display moderate signs. IQ levels can also vary significantly. Those with regular and above average intelligence are said to have high-functioning autism. Asperger syndrome is carefully related, determined for the first time in 1944 by Viennese psychologist Hans Asperger. It wasn't formally characterized as a special disorder till 1994. It shares all of the functions of high-functioning autism, except that people with Asperger's don't have early holdups in developing language. Baron Cohen studies the relationship between technical smarts and autistic propensities, and he has developed a new concept about it: brain electrical wiring. The three hallmarks of autism are trouble communicating, problems with social development, and obsessive, narrow interests. Those obsessions are often incredibly technical. Baron Cohen explains it in regard to understanding versus systemizing. People on the autism spectrum are restricted in their capability to understand or care about the emotions and motives of other people. However, they are intensely intrigued by how certain things work. Their brains, he says, are wired to systemize, or to pick out patterns in info, and to discern the sensible guidelines that govern systems. That suggests people with Asperger's and high-functioning autism usually have wonderful talents for creating and analyzing mechanical systems, such as engines or immaterial systems, like math and computer programs. Baron Cohen just recently surveyed undergrads at Cambridge and found considerably more math majors identified with autism compared to students learning other disciplines, such as medication, law, and social science. Those are all brainy subjects, but mathematics is best fit to a systemizing mind. Baron Cohen's research also found that Cambridge students pursuing mathematics, physics, and engineering were more likely to have autistic relatives compared to students of literature. Spike in autism cases. Autism used to be considered a rare disorder, but present estimates put the number of children with autism spectrum conditions somewhere between 1 in 500 and 1 in 166. There has been a spike in autism rates over the past 2 decades, but the cause is unidentified and very controversial. Baron Cohen is now examining whether what he terms as assortative breeding might play some role in it. He proposes that people who might carry genes for autism can have strong systemizing qualities, which leads them to chase after professions in science and innovation, where they meet like-minded mates and have kids who turn out to be autistic. To evaluate this concept, he is studying areas like California. The California State Health Department reported in 2003 that autism cases doubled between 1998 and 2002, which coincides with the internet innovation boom. Jobs and autism. No one has yet taken a head count of people with high-functioning autism, or Asperger's, among the ranks of engineers, physicists, and computer system developers. Common beliefs holds that spots like NASA and Silicon Valley are sanctuaries for them. To Nancy Minshew, MD, professor of psychiatry and neurology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, that's next to the point. A lot of, she states, are not with jobs at all. Only about 1/3 have jobs, and a lot of them are underemployed. One of the best-known Asperger success stories is that of Temple Grandin, who took a special profession developing systems for handling livestock, and who has written books about her experience. If she needed to go through personnels, she'd be a failure, Minshew tells WebMD. For some crazy reason, we tend to think that they have to pass socially based interviews to do a technical job. Most of the people with Asperger's and autism are going to fail and never ever get a job. Minshew says there are many jobs, not just in technology, that people with autism could do better than anybody else. A man in building said, "I need a tile layer that will lay tiles straight." And I said, "I'll give you someone that'll give you a new definition of straight." Chapter 4. When a tantrum might be coming. Anybody who has had a kid or been around one has probably seen the dreaded tantrum. Most children will argue, be uncooperative, and disobey authority from time to time. However, when that anger and enmity happen usually, causing other problems with friends, at school, or in the house, there may be a cause for concern. While parents or caretakers and caregivers can ignore temper tantrums in young kids and young children, it's harder to shrug them off later in life. Aggressive older kids can position a danger to both others and themselves. What's typical? A common temper tantrum can happen when a child is tired or frustrated, or throughout everyday regimens like bedtime, mealtime, or getting dressed. What's not normal is when the outburst comes out of nowhere at all, or is so extreme that the kid becomes tired. When it becomes routine, that must be a bad omen. Some of the important things that can be a cause for concern are hostility to people, things, or both. It's possible for a kid to want to strike or kick a caregiver out of disappointment every so often. But when it happens in the majority of the kid's tantrums, there could be an issue. Your kid tries to injure himself. He might try to do something like bite himself, scratch himself, bang his head against the wall, try to hurt his foot by kicking something. Your kid can't calm himself down. Simply put, you need to remove him from the environment or promise him something almost after every tantrum to diffuse it. Many tantrums. At home, that means 10 to 20 outbursts per month. If it happens 5 times a day or more than one day, that's cause for concern also. Very long outbursts. If the temper tantrums usually last more than 25 minutes, that could indicate an underlying issue. Why does this happen? A child might snap regularly just because of ADHD, anxiety, a learning disability, sensory processing issues, autism. Something called disruptive behavior disorder could also be the cause. That is more than a tantrum. It can include a pattern of actions that interferes with life. It can include battling, ruthlessness, arguing, defiance of authority. 2 of the most common disruptive conduct disorders are oppositional bold disorder and carry-out disorder. Kids with ODD may show signs of being spiteful, mean, or vicious to others. They're hostile a lot and spend a lot of time arguing or defying authority. They may be more likely to have anxiety or depression as they age. Kids with CD may grow up to have problems in everyday life with friends or in the house. Their continuous disruptive or violent actions might include bullying, using weapons, destroying property, stealing, and lying. If you're concerned about your kid's conduct, talk with your pediatrician. She might refer you to a psychiatrist or a psychologist if needed. Early treatment can help and can focus on objectives like teaching your kid to deal with anger and frustration in ways that are better suited. Chapter 5. What are the kinds of autism spectrum disorders? Autism spectrum conditions include social, communication, and behavioral difficulties. Those issues can be mild, severe, or someplace in between. Early analysis is necessary, simply because early treatment can make a huge distinction. What conditions are thought about spectrum conditions? Until recently, experts spoke about different kinds of autism, such as autistic disorder, Asperger's syndrome, prevalent growth disorder not otherwise defined, PDD-NOS. Yet now they're all called autism spectrum disorders. If you still hear people use some of the older terms, you'll need to know what they mean. Asperger's syndrome. This is on the milder end of the autism spectrum. A person with Asperger's might really be smart and able to manage her daily life. She could be truly focused on topics that intrigue her and discuss them continuously, but she has a much harder time socially. Pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise defined, PDD-NOS. That mouthful of a health diagnosis included most children whose autism was more extreme than Asperger's syndrome, but not as severe as autistic disorder. Autistic disorder. This older term is farther along the autism spectrum than Asperger's and PDD-NOS. It includes the same type of symptoms, but at a more intense level. Childhood disintegrative disorder. This was the rarest and most serious part of the spectrum. It defined children who develop generally and after that quickly lose many social, language, and psychological skills, generally between ages 2 and 4. Usually, these kids also developed a seizure disorder. Is Rett syndrome an ASD? Kids with Rett syndrome usually have behaviors similar to autism, and experts used to group it amongst spectrum conditions. Yet now that it's known to be triggered by a hereditary mutation, it's no longer considered an ASD. Chapter 6. Advantages of occupational therapy for autism. A person who has autism spectrum disorder usually has trouble communicating and connecting with other individuals. His or her interests, activities, and play skills might be limited. Occupational treatment may help people with autism develop these abilities in the house and in school. What's the role of occupational therapy in treating autism spectrum disorder? Physical therapists study human growth and development and an individual's interaction with the environment through day-to-day activities. They are specialists in the social, psychological, and physiological results of disease and injury. This knowledge helps them promote skills for independent living in people with autism and other developing disorders. Physical therapists work as a part of a team that includes parents, instructors, and other professionals. They help set particular goals for the individual with autism. These objectives typically involve social interaction, behavior, and class performance. Physical therapists can help in two main ways: evaluation and treatment. How is occupational treatment beneficial for examination of ASD? The therapist observes children to see if they can do jobs they're expected to do at their ages, getting dressed or playing a game, for instance. Sometimes the therapist will have the kid videotaped during the day so as to see how the kid connects with her or his environment so that she can better examine the sort of care the child needs. The therapist might take note of the fact any of the following: attention span and endurance, transition to new activities, play abilities, need for personal space, reactions to touch or other types of stimuli, motor abilities like posture, balance, or control of things, aggression or other types of behaviors, interactions between the kids and caregivers. How does occupational therapy help a person with autism spectrum disorder? Once a physical therapist has gathered info, she can develop a program for your kid. There's no single ideal treatment program, but early, structured, embellished care has been revealed to work best. Occupational therapy might integrate a variety of methods. Those can help your kid respond better to his or her environment. These OT methods include physical activities like stringing beads or doing puzzles to help a kid develop coordination and body awareness, play activities to assist with interaction and communication, developmental activities like brushing teeth and combing hair, adaptive methods, which includes coping with shifts. What are the benefits of occupational treatment for ASD? The overall objective of occupational therapy is to help the person with autism improve her/his lifestyle at home and in school. The therapist helps introduce, maintain, and enhance abilities so that people with autism can be as independent as possible. These are some of the abilities occupational treatment might promote: daily living skills like toilet training, dressing, brushing teeth, and other grooming abilities. Fine motor skills needed for holding objects while handwriting or cutting with scissors. Gross motor skills used for walking, climbing upstairs, or riding a bike. Sitting, posture, or perceptual abilities, such as telling the differences between colors, shapes, and sizes. Awareness of her or his body and its relation to others. Visual skills for reading and writing. Play, coping, self-help, problem-solving, communication, and social skills. By working on these abilities throughout occupational therapy, a child with autism may have the ability to develop peer and adult relationships, learn how to concentrate on tasks, learn how to postpone satisfaction, express feelings in more appropriate ways, take part in having fun with peers, learn how to self-regulate. What is sensory incorporation treatment? You may have heard a lot about sensory incorporation therapy. That is because some researchers approximate that 8 out of 10 kids with autism have problems processing sensory input. For example, they can't filter out background sounds. Other signs of processing problems include problems with balance, problems with body position in space, oversensitivity to touch and the feel of certain types of clothing, like socks with joints. With autism, social, behavioral, or attention issues can be partly a result of these sensory obstacles. Although more research is needed, OT can help with sensory integration and some of the related behavior issues. Research studies suggest sensory incorporation therapy is less valuable in enhancing scholastic efficiency. Examples of sensory incorporation treatment include being brushed or deeply touched and rubbed, compressing elbows and knees, swinging, spinning on a scooter, wearing a weighted vest. How can a person acquire OT services for autism spectrum disorder? You can obtain occupational treatment services either independently through a statewide early youth interference program or at school. Public law requires schools to offer certain kinds of occupational treatment to those that really need it. Personal insurance also normally covers OT. In addition, Medicaid might cover occupational therapy for autism, even for families with higher incomes. School-based OT tends to be more functional in nature. Usually, it works as an accessory to educational objectives, like enhancing handwriting, so the child can keep up by taking a few notes. Personal treatment will be more medically extensive. Chapter 7. Depression in Kids. Can kids truly struggle with depression? Yes. Youth sadness is not the same as the normal blues and everyday emotions that happen as a child develops. Simply because a child seems sad does not always mean she has substantial depression. If the unhappiness becomes consistent or interferes with normal social activities, interests, schoolwork, or family life, it may suggest that he or she has a depressive health problem. Bear in mind that while depression is a pretty serious illness, it is also a correctable one. How can I tell if my child is depressed? The signs of sadness in children vary. It's usually undiagnosed and untreated because they're passed off as normal emotional and mental changes. Early medical research studies focused on masked depression, where a kid's depressed mood was evidenced by acting out or mad behavior. While this does take place, particularly in more youthful kids, many children show unhappiness or low state of mind comparable to adults who are depressed. The primary signs of depression revolve around sadness, some feeling of hopelessness, and mood changes. Signs and symptoms of depression in kids include irritation or anger, constant emotions of unhappiness and hopelessness, social withdrawal, increased sensitivity to rejection, changes in hunger, either increased or decreased, changes in sleep, insomnia or extreme sleep, singing outbursts or weeping, difficulty concentrating, tiredness and low energy, physical complaints such as stomach aches, headaches that do not respond to treatment, lowered ability to operate during events and activities in the home or with friends, in school, after-school activities, and in other pastimes or interests, emotions of worthlessness or guilt, impaired thinking or concentration, ideas of death or suicide. Not all kids have all of these symptoms. Actually, most will show different symptoms at different times and in different settings. Although some children may continue to function reasonably well in structured environments, most kids with significant sadness will suffer a visible change in social activities, loss of interest in school, and poor academic efficiency, or a change in appearance. Children may also start using drugs or alcohol, specifically if they are over age 12. Although reasonably rare in youths under 12, children do try suicide and may do so impulsively when they are upset. Girls are more likely to try suicide, but boys are more likely to actually kill themselves when they make an attempt. Children with a family history of violence, alcoholic abuse, or physical or sex abuse are at greater risk for suicide, as are those depressive signs. Which children get depressed? Up to 3% of kids and 8% of teenagers in the United States struggle with sadness. Depression is considerably more common in boys under age 10, but by age 16, girls have a higher occurrence of sadness. Bipolar disorder is more typical in adolescents than in more youthful kids. Bipolar disorder in children can, however, be more severe than in adolescents. It might also accompany or be hidden by attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, or conduct disorder, CD. What causes sadness in kids? As in grown-ups, sadness in children can be brought on by any combination of factors that connect to physical health, life events, family history, environment, hereditary vulnerability, and biochemical disturbance. Anxiety isn't a passing mood, nor is it a condition that will go away without appropriate treatment. Can sadness in kids be stopped? Kids with a family history of depression are at greater risk of experiencing depression themselves. Kids who have parents that experience sadness tend to develop their first episode of depression earlier than kids whose parents or caretakers do not. Kids from disorderly or conflicted families, or kids and teens who abuse substances like alcohol and drugs, are also at greater risk of depression. How is depression detected in children? If the symptoms of depression in your kid have lasted for at least 2 weeks, you should schedule a checkout with his/her physician to make certain there are no physical reasons for the symptoms and to make certain that your kid receives proper treatment. An assessment with a mental health care specialist who focus on kids is also recommended. Keep in mind that the pediatrician may ask to speak to your child alone. A mental health assessment should include interviews with you, the parent or main caregiver, and your kid, and any additional mental screening that's needed. Information from instructors, good friends, and classmates can be useful for demonstrating that these signs are consistent during your child's different activities and are a significant change from prior behavior. There are no specific tests, medical or psychological, that can clearly show sadness, but tools such as questionnaires for both the child and parents, combined with personal info, can be extremely useful in helping detect depression in children. Sometimes those therapy sessions and questionnaires can uncover other issues that add to the sadness, such as ADHD, conduct disorder, and OCD. Some pediatricians begin using mental health screens at a kid's 11th year and every year after. What are the treatment choices? Treatment options for children with sadness are comparable to those for adults, and that includes psychotherapy, therapy, and medication. Your child's doctor may suggest psychotherapy first and consider antidepressant medication as an extra option if there is no substantial improvement. The best studies to date indicate that a combination of psychotherapy and medication is most efficient at dealing with sadness. Treating kids with bipolar disorder. Kids with bipolar illness are normally treated with psychological therapy and a mix of medicines, typically an antidepressant and a state of mind stabilizer. Antidepressants need to be used with caution, as they can set off bouts of manic or hyper behavior in kids with bipolar illness. Managing a kid's medication must become a part of a general care plan that includes treatment and routine primary care appointments. The FDA alerts that antidepressant medications may increase the risk of self-destructive thinking and conduct in children and teenagers with depression and other psychiatric conditions. If you have questions or concerns, discuss them with your healthcare provider. Furthermore, If your kid is put on these medications, it is still very important to continue to follow closely with the doctor and therapist. Long-term outlook. Studies have found that novice sadness in children is taking place at younger ages than formerly. As in adults, sadness may occur again later in life. Anxiety typically happens at the exact same time as other physical diseases. And because research studies have shown that sadness might precede more serious mental illness later in life, diagnosis, early treatment, and close tracking are vital. As a parent, it is sometimes simpler to deny that your kid has depression. You might postpone seeking the help of a psychological healthcare expert because of the social preconceptions connected with mental disorder. It is really important for you, as the parent, to comprehend sadness and understand the significance of treatment, so that your child might continue to grow physically and emotionally in a healthy way. It's also essential to seek education about the future impact sadness might have on your child throughout adolescence and adulthood. Parents or caretakers should be particularly alert for signs that might show that their child is at risk for suicide. Warning signs of self-destructive behavior in children include many depressive symptoms, changes in eating, sleeping, activities, social isolation, including isolation from the family, talk of suicide, hopelessness, or helplessness, increased acting out of unwanted behaviors, sexual, behavioral, increased risk-taking behaviors, regular accidents, drug abuse, concentrating on macabre and negative themes, speaking about death and passing away, increased sobbing or minimized emotional expression, giving away belongings. Chapter 8. What to do if you think you might be on the autism spectrum as a grown-up. Signs of autism in grown-ups. Autism is characterized primarily by social and behavioral obstacles, consisting of distinctions in how people perceive their environments and those around them, communication barriers due to how people both process and explain in words information, the need to maintain stiff and sometimes recurring patterns and routines that can disrupt social interactions and quality of life. No two people with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, have the exact same set of signs. ASD is described as a spectrum because of the variety of its symptoms and signs, and their distinctions in severity. Some people with ASD experience symptoms that make life challenging. Others who are considered high-functioning may simply feel like something is different about them. They might have felt that way since youth, but have not been able to determine precisely why. Likewise, they may not see that they feel or behave in a different way, but others around them may see that they behave or act differently. While autism is most often diagnosed in toddlers, it's possible for grown-ups with autism spectrum disorder to go undiagnosed. If you think you might be on the autism spectrum, this article will explain some of the typical characteristics connected with ASD and analysis and treatment options. Signs of high-functioning autism in adults. The majority of the time, prominent symptoms of ASD are detected in young kids around young child age. If you're an adult who has not been detected with autism and actually believe you might have ASD, you might be considered to have high-functioning autism. Following are some signs of autism in grown-ups. Communication challenges. You have a difficult time reading social hints. Taking part in discussion is tough. You have a hard time connecting to other people's ideas or feelings. You're unable to read nonverbal communication and facial expressions well. You might not have the ability to tell whether someone is happy or dissatisfied with you. You use flat, monotone, or robotic speaking patterns that do not communicate what you are feeling. You invent your own detailed words and phrases, understanding figures of speech and turns of phrase, like the early bird catches the worm or don't look a gift horse in the mouth, is challenging. You do not like to look at somebody's eyes when speaking with him. You talk in the same patterns and tones whether you are at home, with friends, or at work. You talk a lot about a couple of favorite topics. Building and maintaining close relationships is difficult. Psychological and behavior difficulties. You have a hard time controlling your emotions and your responses to them. Changes in routines and expectations cause outbursts and disasters. When something unforeseen happens, you react with an emotional meltdown. You get upset when your things are moved or rearranged. You have rigid regimens, schedules, and everyday patterns that must be kept no matter what. You have repeated habits and rituals. You make sounds in spots where silence is expected. Other signs. You care deeply and are knowledgeable about some particular parts of interest, like a historical period, book series, movie, market, pastime, or field of study. You are very wise in a couple of tough scholastic disciplines, but have great difficulty succeeding in others. You experience hypersensitivity or impaired sensitivity to sensory input, like pain, sound, touch, or smell. You feel like you're clumsy and have difficulty with coordination. You prefer to work and play for yourself rather than for others. Others perceive you as an eccentric or a scholastic. Diagnosis of autism in grown-ups. There are presently no standard diagnostic requirements for grown-ups with suspected ASD, but they are in development. In the meantime, medical professionals primarily detect adults with ASD through a series of in-person observations and interactions. They also take into consideration any symptoms the individual reports experiencing. If you're interested in being assessed for ASD, begin with your family practitioner, who will evaluate you to be certain that there isn't an underlying physical disease accounting for your habits. Your physician may then refer you to a psychiatrist or psychologist for extensive evaluation. The clinician will want to talk with you about any problems you have regarding communication, emotions, behavioral patterns, series of interests, and more. You are going to answer questions about your childhood, and your clinician may ask for a consult with your parents or other relatives to get their perspectives about your lifelong conduct patterns. If the diagnostic requirements for children are being used for reference, your clinician can ask your parent questions from that list, relying on their memories of you as a child for more info. If your clinician determines that you didn't show symptoms of ASD in youth, but instead started experiencing symptoms as a teen or grown-up, you may be examined for other possible mental health or affective conditions. Because most autism medical diagnoses are made in kids, it could be a difficulty to find a company who will identify adults. Living with an autism analysis. Receiving an ASD diagnosis as a grown-up could mean a higher comprehension of yourself and how you relate to the world, and it can help you learn how to better work with your strengths and reinforce parts of your life that are challenging. Getting identified can help you get a different perspective on your youth. It can also help those around you to understand more with your special characteristics. Better comprehending the set of challenges that you face can help you find new and inventive ways to work with or around those challenges. You can also work with your clinician and your family to look for treatments that might be right for you. How is autism in adults dealt with? Adults are typically given the exact same treatments as children with ASD. Sometimes adults with ASD could be treated with cognitive, verbal, and used behavior therapy. More frequently, you will need to look for particular treatments based on the challenges you're experiencing, like anxiety, social seclusion, relationship problems, or job difficulties. Some possibilities consist of seeing a psychiatrist experienced in autism treatment for medical assessment, seeking advice from a social worker or psychologist for group and individual therapy, getting therapy on an ongoing basis, getting trade rehab for career-related problems, taking prescription medication for symptoms like anxiety, sadness, and behavioral concerns that may happen alongside ASD. Many adults with autism have found support through online groups and forums, as well as by linking in person with other adults on the autism spectrum. If you're diagnosed with ASD, it's possible to seek treatments that help enhance your quality of life and outlook progressing. While it is not as typical for grown-ups to be diagnosed with ASD as children, more adults are asking to be assessed for autism. As awareness of ASD continues to grow and more detailed diagnostic requirements for adults are put into place, new resources and treatments will also continue to be available. This has been Asperger Syndrome: Challenges of Children and Adults with Autism Spectrum Disorders. Written by David Kelvins. Narrated by Wes Grant. Copyright 2020 by David Kelvins. Production copyright by David Kelvins. Asperger Syndrome: Signs, Treatments, and Complications of Autism Spectrum Disorders. Written by David Kelvins. Narrated by Wes Grant. Chapter 1. What is high-functioning autism? High-functioning autism isn't a main health term or diagnosis. It's an informal one some people use when they speak about people with an autism spectrum disorder who can speak, read, write, and handle fundamental life skills like eating and getting dressed. They might live separately and are a lot like anybody else. Autism spectrum disorder. For a very long time, however, only individuals with extremely serious signs were diagnosed with autism. Beginning in the 1990s, milder forms were recognized, and that includes high-functioning autism and Asperger syndrome, which share lots of the same signs. Then, in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association organized the autism-related conditions into one term: Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD. Still, you might hear some people who aren't medical professionals continue to use terms like Asperger's. It could be that they are not familiar with the spectrum, or they may be referring to a health diagnosis made before the conditions were relabeled as autism spectrum disorder. Signs. Like all people on the autism spectrum, people who are high-functioning have a difficult time with social interaction and communication. They don't naturally read social hints and might find it hard to make good friends. They can get so stressed by a social circumstance that they close down. They don't make much eye contact or little talk. People on the spectrum who are high-functioning can also be really devoted to routine and order. They might have repetitive and restrictive practices that seem strange to others. There's a large range of how they do with school and work. Some do well in school, while others get overwhelmed and can't concentrate. Some can hold a job, and others find that actually hard to do. Everything depends on the individual and the situation, but even for somebody on the spectrum who can do a lot, social skills are usually underdeveloped. Autism spectrum disorder can look different in different people. It's a developing impairment that influences the way people communicate, behave, or interact with others. There's no single cause for it, and signs can be extremely mild or extremely serious. Some children who are on the spectrum start showing signs as young as a few months old. Others seem to have typical development for the first few months or years of their lives, and after that, they begin demonstrating signs. However, up to half of parents of children with ASD notice problems by the time their kid reached 12 months, and between 80% and 90% observe problems by 2 years. Kids with ASD will have signs throughout their lives, but it's possible for them to get better as they get older. The autism spectrum is extremely large. There are people who might have very visible problems, others may not. The typical thread is differences in social skills, communication, and conduct compared to people who aren't on the spectrum. Social skills. A kid with ASD has a tough time interacting with others. Issues with social skills are some of the most typical signs. He may want to have close relationships, but not know how. If your child is on the spectrum, he may show some social signs by the time he's 8 to 10 months old. These may include any of the following. He can't respond to his name by his first birthday. Playing, sharing, or talking with other individuals doesn't interest him. He chooses to be alone. He avoids or turns down physical contact. He avoids eye contact. When he's upset, he does not like to be comforted. He does not understand feelings, his own or others. He may not extend his arms to be gotten or directed with walking. Communication. About 40% of kids with autism spectrum conditions do not talk at all, and between 25% and 30% develop some language abilities throughout infancy, but then lose them later. Some children with ASD start talking later in life. Most have some issues with communication, including but not limited to these: delayed speech and language skills, flat, robotic speaking voice or sing-song voice, echolalia, repeating the exact same phrase over and over, issues with pronouns, saying you instead of I, for example, not using or rarely using typical gestures, pointing or waving, and not reacting to them, inability to stay on topic when talking or responding to questions, not acknowledging sarcasm or joking. Patterns of behavior. Children with ASD also act in ways in which seem uncommon or have interests that aren't normal. Examples of this can include repetitive habits like hand flapping, rocking, leaping, or twirling, consistent moving, pacing, and active conduct, fixations on certain activities or items, particular regimens or routines, and getting upset when a routine is changed even somewhat, extreme sensitivity to touch, light, and sound, not taking part in make-believe play or mimicking others' habits, picky eating habits, lack of coordination, clumsiness, impulsiveness, acting without thinking, aggressive conduct, both with self and others, short attention span. Finding symptoms and signs. The earlier treatment for autism spectrum disorder begins, the more like it is to be efficient. That's why knowing how to determine the signs and symptoms is so essential. Make an appointment with your kid's pediatrician if he doesn't meet these particular growth-related milestones, or if he meets but loses them in the future. Smiles by 6 months. Imitates facial expressions or noises by 9 months. Coos or babbles by 12 months. Gestures, points, or waves by 14 months. Speaks with single words by 16 months, and uses expressions of 2 words or more by 24 months. Plays pretend or make-believe by 18 months. Chapter 2. Do vaccines trigger autism? The research is clear. Vaccines don't cause autism. More than a dozen studies have looked for a link. Every one of them has turned up empty. MMR vaccine controversy. The argument started in 1998 when British scientists published a paper specifying that the measles, mumps, rubella, MMR vaccine triggered autism. The study looked at only 12 children, but it received a lot of promotion. In the meantime, there was a quick increase in the number of children diagnosed with the condition. The paper's discoveries led other doctors to do their own research into the link between the MMR vaccine and autism. At the very least, 12 follow-up studies were done. None found any evidence the vaccine caused autism. An investigation into the 1998 study also uncovered some issues with how it was performed. The journal that published it ultimately withdrew it. That meant the publication no longer stood by the results. There were other issues as well. For example, detectives learned that a legal representative looking for a link between the vaccine and autism had paid the lead scientist more than 435,000 euros, equal to more than $500,000. Thimerosal controversy. A year after the British study, fears about a possible vaccine autism link moved from MMR to a compound used in some children's vaccines. It was called thimerosal, and it included mercury. That is a metal that is damaging to the brain and kidneys at high levels. Doctors used thimerosal to prevent the development of bacteria and fungi in vaccines. There was no evidence that the percentage used in the medicines triggered damage. Still, it was taken out of most children's vaccines by 2001 at the urging of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the USA Public Health Service. To see if thimerosal was connected to autism, scientists studied kids who received vaccines which contained it. They compared them to children who received vaccines that didn't. The CDC carried out or paid for 9 different research studies taking a look at thimerosal and autism. It found no link. What's more, autism diagnoses went on to rise after vaccine makers took thimerosal out of practically all childhood vaccines. Today, trace amounts of it stay in the vaccines to protect against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, called DTaP and DTaP-HIB. What about all vaccinations integrated? Researchers have also aimed to see if all the vaccines needed before age 2 somehow together set off autism. Children receive 25 shots in the first 15 months of life. There are people who fear that getting all those shots so early in life could cause the development of autism. But the CDC compared groups of kids who got vaccines on the suggested schedule and those whose vaccines were postponed or didn't get them at all. There was no distinction in the autism rate between the two groups. In 2004, the Immunization Safety Evaluation Committee of the Institute of Medication published a report on the subject. The group looked at all the research studies on vaccines and autism, both released and unpublished. It released a 200-page report specifying there was no proof to support a link between vaccines and autism. Chapter 3. What are the primary Asperger signs in adults? Most adults with AS have few cognitive or language skill delays. Actually, you might have above average intelligence. Having said that, grown-ups with AS might experience other signs. Many of these can substantially affect daily life. No two people experience AS in quite the exact same way. You may have just a few of these symptoms, or you may experience all of them at different times. Symptoms of high-functioning ASD in grown-ups can be split into 3 parts: emotional and behavioral symptoms. Repetitive behaviors. Participating in repeated conduct is a common sign of ASD. This may include doing the same thing each early morning before work, spinning something a particular number of times, or opening a door a certain way. Just because you engage in this type of behavior does not always mean that you have AS. Other conditions can result in these behaviors too. Incapability to understand psychological concerns. People with AS might have difficulties when asked to interpret social or psychological problems, like sorrow or disappointment. Non-literal problems, that is, things that can't be seen, may avert your rational ways of thinking. First-person focus. Grown-ups with AS may struggle to see the world from another individual's perspective. You may have a difficult time reacting to actions, words, and behaviors with empathy or concern. Exaggerated psychological reaction. While not always intentional, grown-ups with AS may struggle to handle psychological situations, emotions of disappointment, or changes in pattern. That may cause psychological outbursts. Unusual reaction to sensory stimuli. That can be hypersensitivity, oversensitivity, or hyposensitivity, undersensitivity to experiences. Examples include excessively touching people or objects, choosing to be in the dark, or deliberately smelling objects. Communication signs. Social problems. Many people with AS might have to cope with social interactions. You might not be able to carry on small talk conversations. Speech problems. It is not uncommon for grown-ups with regarding have stiff, in some cases described as robotic or repetitive speech. You may also have problems moderating your voice for environments. For instance, you may not decrease your voice in church or library. Extraordinary verbal skills. Grown-ups with AS may have common to strong verbal abilities that might translate to greater vocabulary abilities, especially in parts of interest. Below average nonverbal skills. Grown-ups with AS might not detect nonverbal cues from others, such as hand gestures, facial expressions, or body language. Lack of eye contact. When talking with another individual, you might not make eye contact. Other signs. Clumsiness. Motor coordination troubles are significantly more typical in grown-ups with ASD. These motor skill concerns might appear as trouble performing jobs like sitting or walking correctly. Fine motor abilities, like connecting shoes or opening an envelope, may also be impacted. Fixation. It is not uncommon for people to have hyperfocus as a symptom of AS. It's usually directed towards a particular topic. They may have a deep understanding and large vocabulary related to this subject. They might also insist on talking about it when engaging with others. Positive signs. People with AS may also experience signs that can be considered advantageous or helpful. For instance, as noted above, grown-ups with AS often have an exceptional ability to focus. You might be able to concentrate on an issue specifically if it intrigues you for extended periods of time. Also, your attention to detail may make you extremely successful at problem solving. How is Asperger's detected in grown-ups? Currently, there's no specific test that can detect Asperger syndrome in grown-ups. There are no diagnostic requirements for Asperger syndrome in adults either. Autism spectrum conditions are generally identified in early youth. It's been less common for you to maturate without an autism analysis if you show signs or symptoms. Nevertheless, it's possible. If you actually believe you have autism spectrum disorder, discuss your symptoms with a healthcare provider. You might be referred to an expert, such as a psychologist or psychiatrist, who could assess your behaviors and signs and help determine if you have AS or another ASD. Requirements your doctor might consider include social observations. Your healthcare provider might ask you about your social life. They want to examine your social skills and your interactions with others. This can help them assess how considerably your signs affect this area of your life. Physical issues. Your healthcare provider will want to rule out possible underlying health conditions that could represent your symptoms. Other conditions. People with AS often experience anxiety, depression, and hyperactivity. As a matter of fact, AS could be misdiagnosed as one of those conditions. When an experienced expert is able to analyze you, though, it is more likely you will get a correct diagnosis. How is Asperger's treated in grown-ups? There's no treatment for Asperger syndrome, though these treatments may help grown-ups with autism manage signs and difficulties. Cognitive behavioral therapy. A therapist can help you handle some of the psychological effects of autism, such as a social seclusion and anxiety. They can also help you learn new social skills, so engaging with others feels simpler and less aggravating. Speech treatment. A speech pathologist can work with you to learn voice control and modulation. Professional therapy. Most grown-ups with autism can and do maintain full-time, successful jobs, though some people might deal with career-related troubles. A professional therapist can help you find solutions for the concerns you face at work so that you can continue to achieve success. Medications. In adulthood, prescription drugs may be used to treat individual symptoms, such as anxiety or hyperactivity. Some doctor may also recommend medications to try to reduce signs of AS. Those medications include stimulants, antipsychotics, and serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. Grown-ups with Asperger syndrome might experience signs such as awkward social interactions, difficulty talking with others, an inability to analyze nonverbal habits in others. You might also practice repetitive behaviors and develop a hyper-focus on regimens and rules. Yet, adults with AS typically have strong intellectual capabilities and vocabulary skills. You pay great attention to detail and can focus for extended time periods. While most people with Asperger syndrome or an autism spectrum disorder will be detected as children, some adults will not find a resolution to their symptoms till their adult years. With a diagnosis of Asperger syndrome, you can find therapies and treatments to help you handle any obstacles you face and live a healthy, efficient life that is satisfying and happy. Chapter 4. Asperger's or ADHD. Signs, diagnosis, and treatments. Overview. Asperger syndrome, AS, and attention deficit disorder, ADHD, may recognize terms for parents today. Many parents have a child with an AS or ADHD analysis. Both conditions develop early in life and have similar signs. They can cause difficulties that include mingling, interacting, learning, developing. Yet, these symptoms develop for different reasons in AD and ADHD. A way better understanding of these conditions means physicians are diagnosing more children than ever previously and at earlier ages. Early analysis means getting treatment early. However, getting a diagnosis can be challenging. What is AS? AS is a part of a group of neurodevelopmental conditions called autism spectrum disorders. AS may stop children from socializing freely and communicating clearly. Children with AS might develop repeated, restrictive habits. Those behaviors might include an accessory to a particular product or the need for a stringent schedule. Conditions on the autism spectrum range from mild to severe. AS is a mild form. Many people with AS can lead a normal life. Behavioral therapy and counseling can help AS symptoms. What is ADHD? ADHD develops in childhood. Children with ADHD have a hard time focusing, and potentially learning. Some kids will experience a significant decrease in symptoms as they grow older. Others will continue to experience ADHD symptoms throughout their adolescent years into adulthood. ADHD isn't on the autism spectrum. Even so, both ADHD and autism spectrum conditions come from the bigger category of neurodevelopmental conditions. What signs do AS and ADHD share? Many AS and ADHD symptoms overlap, and AS is sometimes confused with ADHD. Kids with either of these conditions may experience difficulty sitting still, social awkwardness, and trouble interacting with others, regular episodes of continuously talking, a failure to concentrate on things that don't intrigue them, impulsivity, or acting on a whim. How can you tell the difference between AS and ADHD? Although they share many signs, some signs set AS and ADHD apart. Signs specific to AS include having an all-absorbing interest in a particular focused topic, such as sports data or animals, being unable to practice nonverbal communication, such as eye contact, facial expressions, or body gestures, being not able to understand another person's feelings, having monotone pitch or absence of rhythm when talking, missing motor ability development turning points like catching a ball or bouncing a basketball. Symptoms specific to ADHD include being quickly distracted and absent-minded, being impatient, having learning problems, needing to touch or have fun with every little thing, specifically in a new environment, reacting without restraint or contemplation for others when upset or bothered. ADHD symptoms also tend to vary between genders. Boys have the tendency to be more hyperactive and neglectful, while girls are more likely to daydream or quietly not concentrate. When are AS and ADHD visible in children? Symptoms of AS and ADHD exist in a kid's earliest years, and an early analysis is crucial to dealing with and managing the condition. Children with ADHD often aren't diagnosed until they go into an organized environment, like a classroom. At that point, instructors and parents or caretakers may begin to notice behavior symptoms. AS typically isn't identified till the kid is a bit older. The first sign could be a delay in reaching motor skill milestones. Other signs, such as a difficulty interacting socially and keeping relationships, become more obvious as the child grows older. Both conditions are challenging to diagnose, and neither condition can be detected with a single test or process. With autism spectrum disorders, a group of experts must reach a contract about your kid's condition. That team may include psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, speech therapists. The group will collect and consider behavioral assessments and arise from developmental, speech, and visual tests and first-hand accounts of interactions with your child. How are AS and ADHD treated? Neither AS nor ADHD can be treated. Treatment focuses on reducing your child's symptoms and helping them live a very happy, well-adjusted life. The most common treatments for AS include therapy, counseling, behavioral training. Medication is not frequently used. Having said that, Medical professionals may recommend medication to deal with other conditions that take place in children with and without AS. These conditions include sadness, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. As a parent, you are going to see more of your kid's symptoms than a medical professional or therapist can in a brief appointment. You can help your kid and your child's doctor by recording what you see. Be sure to keep in mind your kid's routine, including but not limited to how busy they are and just how long they are away from home during the day. The structure of your kid's day, for example, highly arranged days or minimally structured days. Any medicines, vitamins, or supplements your kid takes. Personal family info that may trigger your child anxiety, like a divorce or a new brother or sister. Reports of your kid's behavior from teachers or child care companies. Most kids with ADHD can manage signs with medication or behavioral therapy and therapy. A combination of these treatments can also achieve success. Medication can be used to treat your child's ADHD symptoms if they interfere too much with everyday activities. If you suspect your child has AS, ADHD, or another growth-related or behavioral condition, make an appointment to see their physician. Bring notes about your child's behavior and a list of questions for their doctor. Reaching a diagnosis for one of these conditions can take several months or even years. Be patient and function as your child's supporter so they get the help they really need. Remember that each child is different. Work with your doctor to ensure your kid is meeting their growth turning points. If they aren't, speak with your physician about possible causes, and that includes AS and ADHD. Chapter 5. Autism Treatment Guide. What is autism? Autism spectrum disorder is a condition that influences the way a person behaves, socializes, communicates with others. It used to be broken down into different conditions such as Asperger syndrome. It's now dealt with as a condition with an extensive spectrum of signs and severity. While it's now called autism spectrum disorder, lots of people still use the term autism. There's no cure for autism, but several approaches can help to enhance social performance, learning, and lifestyle for both kids and grown-ups with autism. It's also important to keep in mind that a lot of the research about autism treatment focuses on kids. This is largely just because existing research suggests that treatment is most effective when started before age 3. Still, tons of the treatments created for children can help adults also. Keep reading to find out more about the different approaches to treating autism. Applied conduct analysis, applied behavior analysis, ABA, is just one of the most commonly and most successfully used autism treatments for both grown-ups and children. It describes a series of techniques designed to encourage positive habits using a reward system. There are several strategies and approaches in ABA, consisting of discrete trial training. That method uses a series of trials to encourage detailed learning. Correct behaviors and answers are rewarded and errors are neglected. Early intensive behavior intervention. Children, normally under age 5, work one-on-one with a therapist or in a small group. It's typically done over the course of several years to help a kid develop communication abilities and lower troublesome behaviors, including but not limited to aggressiveness or self-harm. Critical response training. This is a technique used in a person's daily environment that teaches essential abilities like the inspiration to learn or start communication. Verbal conduct intervention. A therapist works with a person to help them communicate and use language in a wide array of circumstances. Positive conduct support. That involves making ecological changes to the class or home to reward etiquette. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a kind of talk therapy that can be efficient for children and grown-ups with milder forms of autism. Throughout CBT sessions, people learn more about the connections between feelings, thoughts, habits. This may help to identify the ideas and feelings that set off undesirable behaviors. A 2010 review suggests that CBT is specifically helpful in helping people with autism manage anxiety. It can also help them better recognize emotions in others and cope better in social circumstances. Social abilities training. Social abilities training, SST, is a way for people, specifically children, to develop social skills. For some people with autism, engaging with others is extremely difficult, which can cause many challenges with time. A person going through SST learns standard social skills, and that includes how to continue a discussion, comprehend humor, read emotional cues. While it is typically used in kids, SST may also work for teens and young people in their early 20s. Sensory incorporation therapy. People with autism are at times abnormally affected by sensory input, such as sight, sound, smell. Social incorporation treatment is based on the principle that having some of your senses enhanced makes it hard to learn and display positive habits. SST tries to even out an individual's reaction to sensory stimulation. It's normally done by an occupational therapist and relies on play, like drawing in sand or jumping rope. Presently, there's not enough evidence establishing this as an efficient treatment. Occupational treatment. Occupational treatment, OT, is a field of healthcare that focuses on teaching kids and adults the essential abilities they really need in everyday life. For kids, this usually includes teaching fine motor abilities, handwriting abilities, self-care abilities. For adults, OT focuses on developing independent living skills such as cooking, cleaning, managing cash. Speech treatment. Speech therapy teaches verbal skills that can help people with autism communicate better. It's normally done with a speech-language pathologist. It can help kids enhance the rate and rhythm of their speech, in addition to using words correctly. It can also help grown-ups enhance how they communicate about ideas and feelings. Medication. There aren't any medications particularly created to deal with autism, though some medications used for other conditions that might accompany autism may aid with certain signs. Medications used to help manage autism fall into some primary classifications. Antipsychotics. Some newer antipsychotic medications may aid with aggression, self-harm, and behavior problems in both kids and grown-ups with autism. Risperidone, Risperdal, and Aripiprazole, Abilify, are FDA approved to treat irritation related to autistic spectrum disorder. Antidepressants. While many people with autism take antidepressants, scientists aren't yet sure whether they actually exist with autism symptoms. Still, they might work for treating obsessive-compulsive disorder, sadness, and anxiety in people with autism. Stimulants. Stimulants like methylphenidate, Ritalin, are typically used to deal with ADHD, but they might also aid with signs that usually co-occur with autism, which includes hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention. A 2015 review taking a look at the use of medication for autism treatment suggests that about half of children with autism benefit from stimulants, though some experience negative adverse effects. Anticonvulsants. There are those that with autism also have epilepsy, so anti-seizure medications are in some cases prescribed. What about alternative treatments?
There are countless alternative autism treatments that people try. Yet, there isn't much definitive research backing up those approaches, and it's uncertain whether they work. Some of them, such as chelation treatment, may also do more harm than good. Work closely with a physician when checking out alternative treatments. They can help you navigate the research surrounding these treatments and keep away from possibly dangerous methods that aren't backed by science. Potential alternative treatments requiring more conclusive research include gluten-free, casein-free diet plan, weighted blankets, melatonin, vitamin C, omega-3 fats, dimethylglycine, vitamin B6 and magnesium combined, oxytocin, CBD oil. If you don't feel comfortable talking about alternative treatments with your medical professional, consider searching for another doctor to help you find the right treatment. The Centers for Disease Control and Avoidance and the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, enable you to look for a variety of autism resources. Autism is an intricate condition that does not currently have a remedy, though there are a variety of healing approaches and medications that can help manage its signs. Work with your medical professional to sort out the most efficient treatment for you or your child. Chapter 6. Can bipolar disorder and autism happen at the same time? Is there a connection? Bipolar affective disorder, BD, is a typical state of mind disorder. It is known by its cycles of raised moods followed by depressed moods. These cycles can happen over days, weeks, or perhaps months. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a range of signs that include problems with social skills, speech, behavior, and communication. The term spectrum is used simply because these challenges fall along a broad array. Everyone's signs and symptoms of autism are different. There's some overlap between BD and autism. Even so, the accurate number of people with both conditions isn't understood. According to one research study, as many as 27% of children with autism show signs of bipolar illness. Still, other estimates say the real number may be much lower. That's simply because BD and autism share some common symptoms and habits. Many people with ASD might be incorrectly diagnosed as bipolar when their symptoms are really the result of autistic habits. Keep reading to learn how to recognize legitimate symptoms of BD. That can help you understand if what you or a loved one may be experiencing is BD or not. A health diagnosis might not be clear-cut, but you and a psychiatrist can overcome the symptoms to figure out if you have both bipolar affective disorder and autism. What the research says: people who are on the autism spectrum are more likely to show symptoms and signs of bipolar illness. They're also more likely to be identified with a psychiatric disorder than the typical population. Yet, it's not clear what percentage or why. Researchers know that bipolar affective disorder may be linked to your genes. If you have a close member of the family who has either bipolar illness or sadness, you have a higher chance of developing the condition. The same is actually true for autism. Particular genes or mistakes in genes might increase your risk for developing autism. Scientists have recognized some of the genes that might be connected to bipolar affective disorder, and numerous of those genes could be connected to autism also. While this research is preliminary, researchers believe it might help them understand why some people develop both autism and bipolar disorder. How do the signs compare? Symptoms of bipolar disorder fall into two categories. Those classifications are determined by the kind of state of mind you are experiencing. Signs of a manic episode include acting abnormally happy, upbeat, and wired, increased energy and agitation, overstated sense of self and pumped up self-confidence, sleep disturbances, being easily distracted. Signs of a depressive episode include acting or feeling down or depressed, sad, or hopeless, loss of interest in typical activities, sudden and remarkable changes in appetite, unexpected weight loss or weight gain, tiredness, loss of energy and frequent sleeping, inability to focus or concentrate. The severity of autism signs differs from individual to person. Signs of autism include difficulty with social interaction and communication, practicing repetitive behaviors that are hard to disturb, displaying extremely specific preferences or practices that are not quickly changed. How to recognize mania in someone who has autism. If you think you or a loved one might have both bipolar illness and autism, it is necessary to comprehend how the conditions appear together. The symptoms of comorbid BD and ASD are different than if either condition was by itself. Depression is typically obvious and easy to determine. Mania is less clear. That is why recognizing mania in somebody who has autism can be hard. If the behaviors have been a constant since symptoms connected with autism appeared, it's very likely not mania. Nevertheless, if you noticed an abrupt shift or change, these behaviors may be the result of mania. Once you've determined when the symptoms appeared, search for the 7 key signs of mania in people with autism. What to do if you suspect bipolar affective disorder in someone with autism. If you think your signs or those of a loved one are the outcome of bipolar disorder, see your psychiatrist. They can determine whether an acute medical problem is responsible for the symptoms observed. If they eliminate such a condition, they can refer you to a mental health expert. While general practitioners are terrific for many health problems, talking to a psychiatrist or other psychological health expert is best in this circumstance. Make an appointment with one of these experts. Evaluate your issues. Together, you can work to find a diagnosis or an explanation for the signs you're experiencing, whether that's bipolar illness or some other condition. Getting a diagnosis. Getting a health diagnosis isn't always a specific process. Oftentimes, bipolar illness in people with autism does not meet the stringent health definition. That means your psychiatrist may need to use other means and observations to make a health diagnosis. Before a bipolar diagnosis is made, your psychiatrist may want to rule out other conditions. Several conditions typically occur with autism, and lots of them share signs with bipolar illness. These conditions include depression, attention deficit disorder, oppositional bold disorder, schizophrenia. If your psychiatrist starts treating you or a loved one for bipolar disorder when it's not the real reason for signs, the adverse effects of the treatment can be problematic. It's best to work closely with your psychiatrist to reach a medical diagnosis and find a treatment alternative that is safe. What to get out of treatment? The objective of treatment for bipolar affective disorder is to stabilize moods and stop broad mood swings. This can stop bothersome manic or depressive episodes. Someone with the disorder may be able to control their own habits and state of mind more easily if this happens. Treatment can help people do this. Common treatment for bipolar illness is either psychedelic medications or anti-seizure state-of-mind stabilizers. Lithium, Escalith, is the most typically recommended psychoactive medication. Having said that, it can cause significant side effects, including toxicity. For people with communication troubles, which is quite common for people on the autism spectrum, this is a very serious concern. If they are not able to communicate their signs, the toxicity might not be discovered until far too late. Anti-seizure state-of-mind stabilizer medications, like valproic acid, are used too. For kids with BD and ASD, A mix of mood-stabilizing medicines and antipsychotic medications might also be used. These combo medicines include risperidone, Risperdal, and aripiprazole, Abilify. Still, there's a considerable risk for weight gain and diabetes with some antipsychotic drugs, so kids on them must be monitored for their psychiatrist closely. Some psychiatrists may also recommend a family treatment intervention, specifically with kids. This mixed treatment of education and therapy may help reduce extreme mood swings and improve conduct. How to cope. If you are a parent of a child with BD who is also on the autism spectrum, know that you are not alone. Most parents deal with the same questions and concerns as you. Finding them and developing a community of support might be practical for you as you learn to cope with the changes of your kid or loved one's disorder. Ask your psychiatrist or your healthcare facility about regional support groups. You can also use websites like Autism Speaks and Autism Support Network to find people in a circumstance like yours. Likewise, if you're an adult or adolescent dealing with this combination of disorders, finding support can help you learn to deal with the side effects of these conditions. A psychologist or psychological health expert is a wonderful resource for one-on-one treatment. You can ask about group therapy options also. Requesting help from people who know what it resembles to be in your shoes can go a long way to helping you feel empowered and capable of managing difficulties you deal with. Because you will know you're not alone, you may feel more enabled and capable. Chapter 7. Autism Complications. Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that begins in the first few years of life. In a lot of cases, it isn't diagnosed before the age of 3. ASD can impair your communication and social skills to differing degrees. The impacts rely on where your autism falls on the spectrum of intensity. It can vary from moderate, Asperger syndrome, to extreme. Individuals with mild ASD are typically fully functioning in their daily lives and society. Those with more serious forms of ASD might require continuous care and support for their entire lives. ASD can be challenging to deal with by itself. This is very true for both clients and caregivers. ASD is often joined by other conditions and issues. These added disorders and complications can contribute to the difficulties of handling ASD. Issues of ASD. If you have ASD, you might experience sensory problems, seizures, mental health conditions, or other issues. Sensory issues. If you have ASD, you may be extremely vulnerable to sensory input. Something as common as loud noises or bright lights may trigger you to significant emotional discomfort. Alternatively, you might not react at all to some experiences, such as extreme heat, cold, or pain. Seizures. Seizures are pretty common amongst people with ASD. They usually start in childhood or your teenage years. Psychological health concerns. Having ASD puts you at risk of depression, anxiety, impulsive behavior, and mood swings. Mental problems. Lots of people with ASD have some level of mental disability. Children with Fragile X syndrome are more likely to develop ASD. That syndrome is triggered by a flaw on an area of the X chromosome. It is a common cause of mental impairment, specifically among boys. Cancers. Tuberous sclerosis is an unusual disorder that triggers benign tumors to grow in your organs, including your brain. The link between tuberous sclerosis and ASD is unclear, yet ASD rates are much higher among kids with tuberous sclerosis than those without the condition, reports the Centers for Disease Control and Avoidance. Other issues. Other issues that accompany ASD include aggression, uncommon sleep practices, uncommon eating practices, and digestive problems. Difficulties for caretakers. If you are taking care of a child or adult with ASD, it's important to take good care of yourself as well. Many caregivers experience stress and absence of sleep. This can result in errors in care. Taking care of your own health with good nutrition, hydration, sleep, and exercise is just as important for you as it is for the individual you're taking care of. Asking others for help and accepting it when you need it is also an important part of caregiving. If you find it difficult to manage the demands of caregiving, talk with your physician. They may offer strategies or resources to help you cope. Long-lasting outlook. With early and appropriate treatment, many children with ASD grow up to lead independent and productive lives. Early interference programs, medications to help manage symptoms and problems, and encouraging environments can promote a promising future for people with ASD. If you presume that you or your child has ASD, speak to your physician. Chapter 8. Deep Brain Stimulation. What is deep brain stimulation? Deep brain stimulation, DBS, has been revealed to be a feasible alternative for some people who have sadness. Physicians initially used it to help manage Parkinson's disease. In DBS, a physician implants tiny electrodes in the part of the brain that regulates mood. Some medical professionals have practiced DBS since the 1980s, but it's an unusual process. Though long-term success rates have yet to be established, some medical professionals recommend DBS as an alternative therapy for patients whose former depression treatments have been unsuccessful. How deep brain stimulation works. A health professional surgically implants small electrodes in the nucleus accumbens, which is the region of the brain responsible for dopamine and serotonin release, motivation, mood. The process requires several steps. First and foremost, the physician places the electrodes, and then, some days later, they implant the wires and battery pack. The electrodes are linked via wires to a pacemaker-like gadget implanted in the chest that provides pulses of electrical power to the brain. The pulses, which are typically delivered continuously, appear to block the shooting of neurons and return the brain's metabolism back to a state of equilibrium. The pacemaker can be configured and controlled from outside the body by a handheld gadget. Although physicians aren't precisely sure why the pulses help the brain reset, the treatment appears to enhance state of mind and give the person a total sense of calm. Purpose. In many DBS clinical trials, people have reported alleviation of their sadness and a substantial increase in quality of life. In addition to sadness, physicians use DBS to treat people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, Parkinson's disease and dystonia, anxiety, epilepsy, hypertension. DBS is a choice for people with chronic or treatment-resistant depression. Doctors suggest extended courses of psychotherapy and drug treatment before thinking about DBS because it involves an invasive surgical procedure and success rates differ. Age normally isn't a concern, but doctors recommend that you be in sufficient health to endure a major surgery. Advertising. Advertisement. Get anxiety and depression prescriptions online. PlushCare makes it simple to talk online with a doctor. Make a consultation, and in as little as 15 minutes, get seen and get a prescription to get a pickup at your local pharmacy. Possible issues. DBS is typically recognized to be a safe procedure. Still, similar to any type of brain surgery, issues can always show up. Common problems connected with DBS include a brain hemorrhage, a stroke, an infection, a headache, speech problems, sensory or motor control concerns. Another aspect to consider is the need for subsequent surgeries. The chest-implanted monitoring gadget can break, and its batteries last between 6 and 18 months. The implanted electrodes might also really need to be changed if the treatment doesn't appear to be working. You really need to consider whether you're healthy enough to go through a second or third surgery. What the experts say. Simply because long-lasting research studies and clinical trials show differing results with DBS, doctors can only point to their own successes or failures with the procedure. Dr. Joseph J. Finns, Chief of Medical Principals at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Weill Cornell Center, says that using DBS for psychological and psychological conditions should be adequately tested before it is called a treatment. Other specialists think DBS is a practical option for people who aren't seeing success with other therapies. Dr. Ali R. Rezai of the Cleveland Clinic notes that DBS holds pledge for the treatment of intractable major sadness. The takeaway: DBS is an invasive surgery that has differing results. Evaluations and opinions are mixed in the medical field. There's one thing most physicians agree on is that DBS ought to be a far-off choice for treating sadness, and that people should explore medications and psychotherapy before choosing the procedure. Speak to your physician if you think DBS may be an alternative for you. Advertisement. Are you fascinated by attempting CBD for anxiety? CBD is a natural compound that might help reduce signs of anxiety. If you have PTSD, generalized anxiety, or social anxiety, CBD might be useful as a part of your treatment plan. Last clinically reviewed on August 10th, 2016. 7 sources collapsed. Medically reviewed by Deborah Witherspoon, PhD, registered nurse, CRNA, COI. Written by Mara Taylor. Upgraded on April 1st, 2019. Related stories. Should you consider taking medications for sadness during COVID-19? As single parents or caretakers, I didn't have the high end of dealing with depression. Practicing appreciation has benefits but won't deal with sadness, anxiety. When a physical disability keeps you from getting mental health help. Study finds sadness risk greater for e-cigarette users. Possible problems. DBS is generally acknowledged to be a safe procedure. Nevertheless, similar to any kind of brain surgical treatment, problems can always appear. Common complications connected with DBS include a brain hemorrhage, a stroke, an infection, a headache, speech problems, sensory or motor control concerns. Another element to consider is the need for subsequent surgeries. The chest-implanted tracking gadget can break, and its batteries last between 6 and 18 months. The implanted electrodes may also really need to be changed if the treatment does not seem to be working. You really need to consider whether you are healthy enough to go through a second or third surgical treatment. What the experts say. Simply because long-term research studies and clinical trials show varying results with DBS, physicians can only point to their own successes or failures with the procedure. Dr. Joseph J. Finns, Chief of Health Ethics at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Weill Cornell Center, says that using DBS for psychological and emotional conditions should be effectively tested before it's called a therapy. Other professionals think DBS is a feasible choice for people who aren't seeing success with other therapies. Dr. Ali R. Rezai of the Cleveland Clinic notes that DBS holds promise for the treatment of intractable significant depression. DBS is an intrusive surgical procedure that has differing results. Reviews and viewpoints are mixed in the medical field. The one thing most doctors settle on is that DBS needs to be a distant choice for dealing with depression and that people should explore medications and psychotherapy before selecting the procedure. Speak to your doctor if you think DBS might be a choice for you. This has been Asperger Syndrome, Signs, Treatments, and Complications of Autism Spectrum Disorders. Written by David Kelvins. narrated by Wes Grant. Copyright 2020 by David Kelvins. Production copyright by David Kelvins. Asperger syndrome. Alternative treatments and facts related to ADHD, autism, and schizophrenia. Written by David Kelvins. Narrated by Wes Grant. Chapter 1. Raising a child with Asperger syndrome. It takes patience, consistency, and at times a unique dog to raise a child with Asperger's. This is the story of one particular parent who raised someone with Asperger syndrome. I started seeing something was very different about my son, George, when he was about 2 years of age. He didn't make good eye contact. Noise bothered him. He had trouble with some of his motor skills, such as using a spoon. He was also having a bumpy ride at daycare. He'd weep when I dropped him off. He could not connect with other kids. He would get bothered if toys got out of order. And he clapped a lot, more than typical. When I look back at pictures of him at that age, he looked really sad, actually serious. My spouse and I thought that was just the way he was, that he would grow out of these habits. But he didn't. The behaviors worsened. Diagnosing Asperger syndrome. Finally, in January 2005, when he was going to turn 3, his preschool instructors told us they were concerned about his lack of sociability and obsessive propensities. Our pediatrician reviewed the preschool's notes and said that just one symptom is not unusual, but several point to something more serious. Then she discussed Asperger syndrome. I had no clue what that was. Still, after a pediatrician who focuses on growth problems assessed George, the analysis was confirmed. Asperger's resembles autism with some differences. Autistic kids typically have postponed speech, for example, while the speech of kids with Asperger's tends to develop usually. However, children with Asperger's have a tough time with expressive language, and also with empathy and reading social cues. Asperger's and OCD. Many children with Asperger's also develop obsessive interests. That clarifies why George started focusing on garbage at an early age. He knows more about it than most people who work for trash companies. Asperger sometimes has other parts of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, also. George feels a need to shut doors and push in chairs. He gets very upset when his routine changes. Plus, he has anxiety and anger management problems. That is why he claps. It helps him organize himself when he's upset. But to some level, Asperger's and OCD are just labels. What's more important is determining how best to help him. So we try a lot of different things. Lowering the triggers for his aggressive conduct, occupational and physical treatment, a very routine schedule, medications, and finding good friends who will be good role models for him. In 2015, we also purchased him a golden retriever young puppy called Tiger. It's been helping him develop social skills. George can speak to Tiger, have fun with Tiger, tell Tiger he likes him. It is good practice for associating with people. Asperger's is not insurmountable. It's not the kiss of death. George is a really bright kid, but his electrical wiring is different. That is all. Chapter 2. What is childhood schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a severe mental health disorder in kids younger than 13 that impacts the way they handle reality. They may have unusual ideas, emotions, or habits. It's also called childhood onset or really early onset schizophrenia. The disorder is rare and may be hard to area. There's no remedy, but treatment can help. Childhood schizophrenia signs and symptoms. Some kids who develop schizophrenia initially go through a period called the prodrome or the prodromal phase. They might withdraw from daily life with more anxiety and less interest in school or friends. Not all children who show these signs will have a psychotic disorder, so it is essential to talk to your physician if you notice any issues. Early youth schizophrenia signs. An infant or toddler may have signs of schizophrenia that are different from those in older kids, teens, and grown-ups. The disorder influences how your child develops. You might see things like extended periods in which they're slow or not active, floppy arms or legs, delays in crawling, walking, or talking, odd movements like rocking or flapping their arms, a limp or plunged posture. Some of these symptoms show up in kids with other issues besides schizophrenia, and some happen in children with no psychological health conditions. Only your child's doctor can figure out what's really going on. Later childhood schizophrenia signs. In older kids, you may notice the behavior changes of schizophrenia over time or unexpectedly, as though out of nowhere at all. Your child might act withdrawn and clingy, or they might speak about strange and disturbed ideas and fears. Tell your doctor as soon as you see signs of schizophrenia. It is necessary to get a diagnosis and start treatment before your child shows signs of a break from reality, called psychosis. Signs in older kids include they cannot discriminate between reality and dreams, stories, TV shows, etc. Intense fear that a person or something is hurting them, delusions. Hearing things that aren't real, acoustic hallucinations, like whispers or voices telling them to do something. Seeing things that aren't real, visual hallucinations, such as flashing lights or patches of darkness. Moodiness or anxiety. A lack of emotional expressions when they speak. Upset, confused conduct, followed by periods of sitting and gazing. Acting like a much more youthful child. Again, not every child who has these signs has schizophrenia. Talk with your medical professional if you have any issues. Specialists divide symptoms of youth schizophrenia into 3 categories: positive, negative, and cognitive. Positive symptoms are psychotic, which means they're a break with reality. These include uncommon movements, uncommon ideas, and hallucinations. Negative symptoms include behavior and feeling. They include seclusion, not speaking much or at all, and showing little or no emotion. Cognitive symptoms show distinctions in how a kid thinks or remembers, like trouble focusing or comprehending something. Childhood schizophrenia triggers. Specialists aren't sure precisely what triggers schizophrenia or why it starts in youth for some and at an older age for others. Your kid's genes and brain chemicals might play a role. The disease sometimes happens in more than one relative. If a person in your family has schizophrenia, your child has a greater chance of getting it. Some specialists also think schizophrenia could be linked to things that took place throughout a woman's pregnancy, such as drug or alcohol use, contact with infections, germs, or chemicals, tension, poor nutrition. Youth schizophrenia medical diagnosis. A pediatric psychiatrist can diagnose schizophrenia in children. Just because different mental health conditions can have similar signs, it can be rough to get the right analysis. It may take a lot of time and effort for everyone. Other specialists will get involved to give your kid a total physical exam, blood tests, psychological health tests, imaging tests of their brain, and other tests. They're all type in finding the right analysis and coming up with a treatment plan to help your kid manage the illness. Schizophrenia treatment for kids is like treatment for grown-ups. It includes medications. Your medical professional may suggest one or more antipsychotics. These drugs are also called neuroleptics. They manage delusions, beliefs, crazes that you aren't true, and hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't real. Talk with your doctor about adverse effects and other drugs your child shouldn't take while they are using these medications. Psychiatric therapy. Mental health specialists who concentrate on childhood schizophrenia may help your child manage their symptoms. Household therapy and support system can teach your child and others in the family about the illness and how to handle difficult situations. Life abilities training. Special classes can teach your kid social skills and how to do day-to-day jobs. They can also get tips on how to get rid of difficulties in school. If your kid has extreme symptoms or a mental health crisis, remain in the health center can be the quickest way to get symptoms under control in a safe place. Other alternatives include part-time medical facility and home care. Use schizophrenia complications. Without treatment, schizophrenia can cause problems in childhood and later in life. These include other mental disorders, self-harm or suicide, drug or alcohol use disorders, dispute with and isolation from family and friends, legal and financial problems, trouble living alone, going to school, or keeping a job. Use schizophrenia outlook. When childhood schizophrenia is detected and dealt with early, your child might have the ability to manage it as they turn into an adult. Health professionals will pay attention to their condition and treatments for life. Although there's no remedy for this disorder, people who have schizophrenia can be successful at school, at work, and in their social lives. Chapter 3. Research study confirms that kids with autism most likely to have stomach troubles. Kids with autism are more likely to have signs of irritable bowel syndrome than kids without ASD. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is generally defined by its social and behavioral signs, and problems of stomach problems amongst children with ASD are sometimes crossed out as just stories. But a new study, appearing in the journal Pediatrics, is the first of its kind to examine all the published, peer-reviewed research about gastrointestinal GI issues in children with ASD. It shows that autistic kids do in fact experience more and more severe stomach problems than other kids their age. Scientists from the Marcus Autism Center, Kids Healthcare of Atlanta, and Emory University School of Medication found that these GI symptoms are real and damaging to children. The research study revealed that kids with ASD are more likely to have constipation and diarrhea, and to grumble about stomach pain. Is diet plan to blame? Researchers do not know why autistic children are more likely to have stomach problems, but picky eating and other dietary restrictions, particular of some children with ASD, seem to contribute in their GI difficulties. Children with ASD are known to experience feeding issues and associated dietary problems, clarified William Sharp, Ph.D., Director of the Pediatric Feeding Disorders Program at Marcus Autism Center, and an Assistant Professor of Autism and Related Disorders at Emory University. These issues frequently involve strong preferences for fats, snacks, and processed food, and rejection of fruits and vegetables. That pattern of food selectivity might cause or worsen GI signs, such as abdominal pain or constipation. Over the long term, these GI signs can be damaging. Dr. Barbara McAlannon, a pediatric gastroenterologist at Kids Healthcare of Atlanta and assistant professor of pediatrics at Emory University, says that mishaps, even by toilet-trained kids, are one possible repercussion. Children with gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, are also at increased risk for esophageal cancer if the condition is left unattended. Efficient communication is challenging for any child, but it can be particularly hard for kids with autism to reveal themselves. And, as the findings suggest, some of their behavioral symptoms might actually stem from intestinal problems. The discomfort and pain of GI issues like irregularity and diarrhea can result in what appears to be disruptive conduct. Several problems have kept the connection between ASD and GI disorders from receiving the attention and study it deserves, and one myth has been specifically destructive: the unfounded assertion that vaccination somehow triggered an inflammatory GI illness, which then triggered autism, has substantially impeded progress in this field for many years, Sharp said. That debate diverted attention from the GI needs of children with ASD, and we hope that our work helps spur renewed investment for resolving these needs. What can moms and dads do to help? Children's GI grievances really need to be taken seriously, and communication between doctors and parents is essential, particularly for those children who have a hard time to speak for themselves. McKellennan advises that doctors ask parents or caretakers of children with ASD, particularly about their GI functions and symptoms. They should be asking the families for info about the qualities of the child's stool and habits, like increased irritation before using the toilet, McKellennan said. Likewise, questions about behaviors during eating and with specific foods might discover issues for the medical professionals. Open-ended questions like, "Do you have issues that your child's stomach hurts?" are also helpful. Parents or caretakers should make a record of their child's habits and report any problems to their pediatricians. I would advise parents to write down the complaints, making sure to include the child's diet, defecation, and habits, McKellennan said. A pattern may be found that can help the pediatrician, gastroenterologist, and nutritional expert determine a prospective problem. Chapter 4. Why people with autism pass away at a much younger age. Research out of Sweden exposes that grown-ups identified with autism spectrum disorder die 16 years earlier than their equivalents. Suicide is one significant cause. When Wendy Fournier initially saw the numbers, she said it was a real start in the gut. A study out of Sweden completed late last year revealed that people with autism passed away approximately 16 years earlier than those without the condition. It also revealed that the leading causes of death in people with autism were heart problems, suicide, and epilepsy. Fournier is president of the National Autism Association and also has a 16-year-old daughter with severe autism. The results of the study stunned her. "It actually rocks you," Fournier told Healthline. "It was shocking to see all that in print." When Wendy Fournier initially saw the numbers, she said it was a real start in the gut. A study out of Sweden finished late last year revealed that people with autism died an average of 16 years earlier than those without the condition. It also revealed that the leading causes of death in people with autism were heart problems, suicide, and epilepsy. Fournier is president of the National Autism Association and also has a 16-year-old daughter with severe autism. The results of the research study stunned her. "It truly rocks you," Fournier told Healthline. "It was shocking to see all that in print." Fournier saw the information had motivated her organization and other groups to promote more research on the results and treatment of autism. "We really need to dig deeper," she said. "We really need to deal with autism as a whole-body disorder." What the study found. The research study findings were recently released in the British Journal of Psychiatry. It's the first time conclusive research has been done on the death rate of people with autism. Fournier said that it is because till 20 years ago autism analysis was unusual, and it was considered a condition that only impacted children. Now, researchers have the chance to follow a substantial number of grown-ups with autism. "It lets us see what happens to people with autism as they age," said Fournier. Between 1987 and 2009, researchers from the Karolinska Institute looked at more than 27,000 people in Sweden detected with autism spectrum disorder, ASD. This group was compared to a group of 2.6 million people without ASD. During that time, less than 1% of the general population passed away. The death rate for the group with ASD was 2.5%. When Wendy Fournier initially saw the numbers, she said it was a real start in the gut. A study out of Sweden finished late in 2015 exposed that people with autism died an average of 16 years earlier than those without the condition. It also revealed that the leading causes of death in people with autism were heart problems, suicides, and epilepsy. Fournier is president of the National Autism Association and also has a 16-year-old daughter with extreme autism. The results of the study stunned her. "It really rocks you," Fournier told Healthline. "It was stunning to see all that in print." Fournier said the info has motivated her company and other groups to promote more research on the impacts and treatment of autism. "We need to dig much deeper," she said. "We need to treat autism as a whole-body disorder. Learn more. Brain chemical does not do its job in people with autism." What the research study found. The study discoveries were recently published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. It's the first time conclusive research has been done on the mortality rate of people with autism. Fournier said that it is until 20 years ago, autism diagnosis was unusual, and it was considered a condition that only affected kids. Now, researchers have the chance to follow a significant number of grown-ups with autism. "It lets us see what happens to people with autism as they grow older," said Fournier. Between 1987 and 2009, researchers from the Karolinska Institute looked at more than 27,000 people in Sweden detected with autism spectrum disorder, ASD. This group was compared to a group of 2.6 million people without ASD. Throughout that time, less than 1% of the general population passed away. The mortality rate for the group with ASD was 2.5%. What the researchers also discovered was that typical lifespan for the general population was about 70 years old. In the ASD group, the average age was about 54. Perhaps more surprising, people with ASD that also had cognitive disabilities had an average lifespan just under 40 years of age. The reasons for early death. The scientists reported suicide was one of the leading reasons for early death amongst people with ASD. In fact, the scientists concluded suicide rates of people with ASD who had no cognitive handicap were 9 times higher than the general population. Previous research studies have revealed that 30% to 50% of people with ASD have considered suicide, according to a report issued recently by the not-for-profit company Autistica. The suicide rate is higher among girls with ASD and people with milder forms of the condition. The experts said that's simply because this group are more knowledgeable about their condition and possible difficulties assimilating. In addition, bullying can be an everyday event for people with ASD. Anxiety and sadness are pretty common responses to such treatment. Both of those mental health tensions are leading factors in suicide. This is the psychological cost of being left out from society. Steve Silberman, the author of Neurotribes, The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity, told Healthline. The Swedish researchers also noted that epilepsy is rather common amongst people with ASD, and the possibility of developing it increases with age. The researchers approximated 20 to 40% of people with ASD also have epilepsy, compared to 1% of the general population. People with ASD and cognitive special needs, the researchers added, are 40 times more likely than the general population to die prematurely from a neural condition. In their report, Autistica authorities advised more research be done to establish the relationship between autism and epilepsy. A host of health issues. The general population, according to the Autistica report, also tends to have better general health than people with ASD. People with ASD might experience a range of medical issues, like food poisonings, though one of the most typical is heart disease. There's no scientific evidence to clarify why this condition is so typical with autism, but Fournier says stress may have a lot to do with it. Bullying may result in emotions of alienation. Other individuals with ASD might experience sensory overload and sensitivity to sound and bright light. The stress of engaging with other people or going on a job interview may also be overwhelming. For many, regular social circumstances are an acting job. Dr. Janet Lintala, the author of The Unprescription for Autism, and the mother of a 21-year-old son detected with autism, told Healthline. Fournier said this everyday burden of social awkwardness and physical disorders takes a toll psychologically and physically. They experience lifelong tension and anxiety, she said. It's nearly like this flawless storm that follows them, added Lintala. They're wired into a constant state of flight or fight. That, both women said, can result in physical ailments, which includes heart disease, brain inflammation, strokes, and diabetes. Chapter 5. Chemical Imbalance in the Brain. What you should know. What is a chemical imbalance in the brain? A chemical imbalance in the brain is said to occur when there's either too much or too little of certain chemicals, called neurotransmitters, in the brain. Neurotransmitters are natural chemicals that help assist in communication between your nerve cells. Examples include norepinephrine and serotonin. It's often said that psychological health conditions, such as sadness and anxiety, are brought on by a chemical imbalance in the brain. The hypothesis is at times called the chemical imbalance hypothesis, or chemical imbalance theory. If you are just wondering if the symptoms you're having actually are brought on by a chemical imbalance, it is essential to know that there's a fair bit of controversy surrounding this principle. In fact, the health community has mainly refuted this principle. Scientists argue that the chemical imbalance hypothesis is more a figure of speech. It does not really catch the true complexity of these conditions. To put it simply, mental health conditions aren't simply triggered by chemical imbalances in the brain. There's a lot more to them. What are the signs of a chemical imbalance in the brain? Scientists in the late 1950s first proposed the idea that psychological health conditions are triggered by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Research at the time had focused on the role that chemicals in the brain play in sadness and anxiety. These scientists assumed that lower than regular levels of neurotransmitters can result in signs such as emotions of unhappiness, helplessness, worthlessness, or empty space, eating way too much or loss of appetite, insomnia or sleeping too much, uneasiness, irritability, a feeling of impending doom or danger, lack of energy, distancing yourself from others, feeling pins and needles or lacking empathy, extreme mood swings, ideas of hurting yourself or others, being unable to carry out day-to-day activities, hearing voices in your head, alcohol or drug misuse, an inability to concentrate. What causes a person to have a chemical imbalance in their brain? The exact cause of mental disorders is still uncertain. According to the Mayo Clinic, researchers actually believe that genes and ecological and social aspects, such as stress or trauma, contribute. The chemical imbalance theory is unproven and typically cited as a clarification for mental health conditions. It specifies that these conditions are triggered by an imbalance of neurotransmitters between nerve cells in the brain. For instance, depression is said to be a result of having insufficient serotonin in the brain, but the concept doesn't clarify how these chemicals end up being out of balance in the first place. As Harvard Medical School reports, there are likely millions of different chain reactions occurring in the brain at any given time. These reactions are accountable for an individual's mood and overall feelings. There would be no other way to tell if someone really had a chemical imbalance in their brain at an offered time. The most common proof used to support the chemical imbalance concept is the efficiency of antidepressant medications. These medications work by increasing the amounts of serotonin and other neurotransmitters in the brain. Though simply because an individual's mood can be raised with drugs that increase brain chemicals does not mean that their signs were brought on by a shortage in that chemical in the first place. It's also possible that low serotonin levels are just another symptom of sadness, not the cause. Many people with sadness do not get a lot better after being treated with these types of medications. One study approximates that current antidepressants on the market only work in about 50% of those with sadness. Is there a test to recognize a chemical imbalance in the brain? There are no dependable tests available to discover if you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. Tests that use urine, saliva, or blood to measure neurotransmitters in the brain very likely won't be really precise. Not all neurotransmitters are produced in the brain. Presently, marketed tests won't have the ability to notice the difference between neurotransmitter levels in your brain and neurotransmitter levels in the body. In addition, neurotransmitter levels in your body and brain are continuously and rapidly changing. This makes such tests unreliable. Identifying mental illnesses. Mental health conditions aren't identified with chemical tests. Your treatment plan won't be guided by such tests either. Your doctor may order blood tests to rule out other conditions, such as a thyroid disorder or vitamin deficiency, which can trigger signs of a mental health condition. If no underlying illness is found, you will likely be described a mental health expert, like a psychiatrist or psychologist. They'll perform a psychological examination. This includes a series of questions about your thoughts, feelings, eating and sleeping practices, daily activities. How is a chemical imbalance in the brain dealt with? There are several medications readily available that are thought to work by changing the levels of certain brain chemicals. Those drugs alter levels of either dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, or norepinephrine. Some work on a mix of two or more of those chemicals. Examples of these medications include selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. SSRIs work by blocking the reabsorption of serotonin. Examples are fluoxetine, Prozac, paroxetine, Paxil, and citalopram, Celexa. Serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs. This includes duloxetine, Cymbalta, and venlafaxine, Effexor XR. SNRIs work by blocking the reabsorption of both serotonin and norepinephrine, leading to increased levels of these two substances in the brain. Tricyclic antidepressants, TCAs, examples are imipramine, tofranil, and nortriptyline, Pamelor. TCAs block the reabsorption of noradrenaline and serotonin. Norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitors, NDRIs. NDRIs, like bupropion, Wellbutrin, stop your brain from reabsorbing the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine. Monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs. MAOIs keep your brain from breaking down norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. These medications, including but not limited to isocarboxyl, Marplan, and phenelzine, Nardil, are not as well known as other kinds of antidepressants. When it comes to psychological health conditions, there are likely many aspects at play. It's challenging to tell whether a particular drug will ensure treatment. For some people, sadness and other psychological health conditions are episodic, which means that the signs come and go. Medications could be able to help manage your symptoms, but the disorder may take a long period of time to get into remission. Signs can also come back later. While taking medications for a psychological health condition, talk treatment strategies are also an important addition to your treatment plan. Psychotherapy helps to transform your thinking and behavioral patterns into healthier ones. One example is called cognitive behavior therapy. This kind of treatment can help stop your sadness from returning once you are feeling better. Mental health conditions aren't as simple as having a chemical imbalance in the brain. There's little proof to prove that an imbalance in certain brain substances is the reason for any type of mental health condition. If you are experiencing any of the symptoms and signs of a psychological health condition, it is essential to see a doctor for a medical diagnosis. Do not wait any longer to get help. Once you get a health diagnosis, you may need to try different medications or combinations of medications before you find the one that works for you. Your doctor will really need to take into account some variables when identifying a treatment plan. Patience is crucial, and when you find the right treatment, most people show improvement in their signs within 6 weeks. Chapter 6. Long-term use of Tylenol through pregnancy may raise risk of autism or ADHD. Researchers say pregnant women who use acetaminophen products for 4 weeks or more can increase their unborn kids' risk of autism and ADHD. Acetaminophen is just one of the most common treatments used by pregnant women for pain and fever. The compound, sold under the brand Tylenol, is generally considered safe throughout pregnancy. New proof suggests prolonged usage may have serious effects on coming children. A recent Israeli study finds that prolonged usage of acetaminophen could be linked to an increased risk of both autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit disorder, ADHD. The research was performed at the University of Jerusalem and included more than 100,000 women with a follow-up period of 3 to 11 years. The study, led by Ilan Matok, Ph.D., head of the Pharmacoepidemiology Research Lab at the Institute for Drug Research, School of Drugstore at the Hebrew University Faculty of Medication, as well as doctoral student Ree Marsawa, was published in the American Journal of Public Health. The scientists say they found strong evidence that usage of acetaminophen for 28 days or more during pregnancy is related to a 30% increase in relative risk for ADHD and a 20% increase in relative risk for ASD, compared with women who didn't take acetaminophen throughout pregnancy. Relative risk is when the chance of something happening is compared between two groups and generally uttered as a portion. Nevertheless, it does not show the real chances of something taking place. That's the outright risk. Barry Sears, Ph.D., author of the New York Times' very popular book, The Zone, and president of the not-for-profit Swelling Research Structure, told Healthline that while the relative risk is borderline, it's still statistically substantial. Since ADHD and autism presently impact a big percentage of the population, the outright boost in risk due to long-lasting acetaminophen use should certainly be considered to be of concern. It's not just acetaminophen. Dr. Edward Hallowell, kid and adult psychiatrist, founder of the Hallowell Center for Cognitive and Emotional Health, and leading authority in the field of ADHD, told Healthline it is necessary to recall that the vast majority of ADHD is passed along through genes. He added that other aspects should also be considered. Pregnant moms who drink too much alcohol or are exposed to tobacco smoke put their coming child in danger for developing ADHD, Hallowell said. Additionally, any kind of head trauma to the fetus, like trauma to the mom's abdominal area throughout pregnancy, a forceps delivery, or a tough C-section, can cause ADHD, and an absence of oxygen at birth from breathing distress. Short-term acetaminophen use is safe. Because existing studies were significantly restricted, the scientists suggest that these results should be translated cautiously, since this information may make pregnant women unnecessarily anxious. They also say that it is essential to remember that pain and fever during pregnancy can damage the developing fetus, and medical professionals still consider acetaminophen safe for short-range use, 1 week or less, during pregnancy. Our research study provides the initially extensive introduction of developing results following prolonged acetaminophen use during pregnancy, said Matok in a press release. Our discoveries suggest an association between prolonged acetaminophen use and a boost in the risk of autism and ADHD, he added. Though the observed boost in risk was small and the current studies have substantial constraints, While unnecessary usage of any medication should be kept away from in pregnancy, our company believes our findings shouldn't alter present practice, and women shouldn't keep away from use of short-term acetaminophen when medically needed. This current study offers evidence that pregnant moms should stay away from taking acetaminophen for 4 successive weeks or more, Hallowell added. The reason is that long-lasting use increases the risk of the child's developing ADHD or ASD. So, if you are pregnant and have a headache, you can still take acetaminophen for a short while. Truth be told, you should take it because it's not that good to be pregnant and in pain. You should also consult your physician and track down the cause of your pain if it persists. Pain can affect fetal health. Sears notes that unattended pain can impact fetal health. Pain is generally accompanied by an overproduction of inflammatory cytokines, proteins crucial for cell signaling, and inflammatory isocyanoids, signaling molecules made from fatty acids that have an adverse influence on the developing child's dopamine circuits, leading to lowered levels of dopamine that could lead to ADHD, Sears said. I think that using acetaminophen for 3 days or less should be considered safe. Sears advises, if you're in pain and want a better suited swelling reduction method, I think it would be better to follow an anti-inflammatory diet plan and increase the intake of fish oil to decrease the need for acetaminophen. Doing both will also have a favorable impact on the baby's health. Chapter 7. Alternative Treatments for Autism Spectrum Disorder. Many parents of children who have an autism spectrum disorder choose to consider complementary and alternative medicine to help deal with general health and potential behavioral issues. A projected 30 to 95% of children with an autistic disorder have been given some type of the treatment. Not all webcam treatments have been completely investigated, while many are actually secure and some may even be effective. Take care. Not each treatment will work for everyone on the spectrum. What works for a single person might not work for another. Talk to your doctor before changing your kid's treatment, diet plan, or lifestyle. Autism diet plan. Some physicians advise an autism diet. That means lowering or eliminating gluten and casein from the diet. Gluten is a protein in the seeds of wheat and other grains like barley and rye. Gluten is in many foods and can trigger gastrointestinal issues. Casein is a protein in milk products, and it might be another typical source of digestion problems. It's thought that both gluten and casein can be inflammatory and that lowering them from the diet plan can help general health and conduct in those who have autism. According to the Autism Society, the average American diet plan includes more wheat and dairy products than is needed. These proteins can also substantially impact conduct. According to University of Florida Department of Pediatrics, this is simply because peptides in gluten and casein bind to opioid receptors in the brain that can mimic the effects of illicit drugs like heroin or morphine, causing sleepiness, giddiness, neglectful conduct or zoning out, aggression, self-abusive behavior. The Autism Society suggests a trial gluten and dairy-free diet plan. Improvements may be seen in as little as 1 to 3 months. If you want to try eliminating gluten and casein from your diet plan, you should only try to eliminate one at a time. See if removing just one makes an impact without removing both food items. It's important to make sure that your child is getting the nutrition they really need, which can be more difficult when they're on a specialized diet. Kids on a dairy-free diet may need to take calcium supplements, or you really might need to increase the amount of non-dairy calcium-rich foods in their diet plan. A current research study ran a double-blind trial challenge to evaluate if the autism diet actually helped the behavior or bowel health of autistic kids. This research study didn't find proof that the autism diet plan made a significant distinction. The sample size for the trial was little, however, and the diet plan may still help others on the spectrum. Omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are a type of good fat in fish oils and in supplement form. They assist with brain development and function. According to the journal Biological Psychiatry, some small early studies have revealed that including omega-3s to a child's diet plan can improve hyperactive and recurring conduct in those who have autism. Other studies published in the Journal of Kid and Teenager Psychopharmacology suggest that omega-3s can help improve social skills in kids with an ASD. Some studies support omega-3 fatty acids, and some studies argue against it. A current research study utilizing a placebo-controlled trial found that kids with autism endured omega-3s well, but the omega-3s didn't help enhance their behavioral problems. The study stated that the routine health benefits of omega-3 fatty acids still applied. Talk with your doctor or a professional dietitian to talk about the best way to add these healthy fats to your child's diet plan. Melatonin and sleep. Many kids with autism experience consistent sleep issues, such as having difficulty falling asleep, awakening early, having poor sleep quality, restlessness. Insomnia can worsen tons of the symptoms of autism, and you shouldn't disregard it. A recent pilot study published in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Conditions found that the natural supplement melatonin helped children with ASD sleep better and decreased signs during the day. The study notes, however, that melatonin must only be used if autism is the reason for the sleep problems. If something else is causing the issue, you should deal with the underlying problem. Other solutions for sleep conditions. Anxiety or overwhelming stimuli can also cause children with autism to have difficulty sleeping. Intense light treatment is a prospective treatment for children with autism who have a hard time to sleep at night. With this treatment, the child is exposed to periods of bright light in the early morning, which may help the body's natural release of melatonin. Other treatments that can help your child sleep more include keeping away from stimulants, such as caffeine or sugar, before bed, establishing a routine that you follow each night, turning off TV or video games at the very least an hour before bedtime, and relaxing the child by playing soft music or by reading a book, adding light-blocking curtains to your kid's room to help stop outside stimuli from interrupting them. Chelation therapy. Chelation therapy is created to flush heavy metals from the body. It's a treatment for poisoning from heavy metals like lead or mercury. It's not an approved treatment for autism. There is no proof that metals trigger autism or evidence that this treatment works. It might even be dangerous to some people. These medications can possibly cause seizures, heart problems, or organ damage. While some people suggest this, the potential danger is not warranted. Relaxation strategies. Conduct issues are a common issue in people with ASD. Calming strategies like deep pressure massage or wearing weighted clothes might soothe agitation in people with ASD. Specialist June Groden suggests progressive relaxation methods developed by Edmund Jacobson that involves teaching people the distinction between tense and relaxed muscles. People are then taught how to tighten and relax their muscles, including but not limited to those in the hands, arms, and legs. That is done in combination with deep breathing and can help minimize stress and agitation. This has been Asperger Syndrome, Alternative Treatments and Facts Related to ADHD, Autism, and Schizophrenia. Written by David Kelvins. Narrated by Wes Grant. Copyright 2020 by David Kelvins. Production copyright by David Kelvins.